December 16th, 1944. The Ardennes forest, a sprawling, silent cathedral of snow-laden pines near the border of Luxembourg. The air is so cold it feels like breathing microscopic shards of glass. Each exhalation hangs in the air, a fleeting white ghost in the pre-dawn gloom. You are here, dug into the frozen earth, the icy mud clinging to your wool trousers and the steel of your M1 Garand. The world has been reduced to this shallow foxhole, this small perimeter of shivering American soldiers from Company C, 3rd Battalion, of the 110th Infantry Regiment. The 28th Infantry Division, the Keystone Division, is stretched thin, a fragile red line on a map that a German fist is about to smash. First Lieutenant Charles L. Kelly moves along the line, his feet crunching softly on the crusted snow. He is not a large man, but his presence is a bulwark against the gnawing fear that seeps from the dense, dark woods. He moves from foxhole to foxhole, his words low and steady, checking fields of fire and offering a quiet word of encouragement. His men, no more than 35 of them in this isolated platoon, watch him, their young faces pale and drawn beneath their steel helmets. They are exhausted, having been on the line for weeks, but they are riflemen, and this is their job. They clutch their weapons, their knuckles white, and stare into the oppressive grayness of the forest. The quiet is wrong. It is too deep, too absolute. A sound begins, almost too low to be perceived. It is not the familiar crack of artillery or the chatter of a distant machine gun. It is a low, guttural rumble that seems to vibrate up from the frozen ground itself, a mechanical growl that speaks of immense weight and power. The men exchange uneasy glances. That is the sound of engines, not one or two, but dozens, hundreds. The rumble grows, accompanied by a faint, rhythmic clanking, tank treads, half-tracks, the sound of an army on the move. Lieutenant Kelly stills, his head cocked, listening. His eyes narrow as he scans the impenetrable wall of trees before them. The order is passed down in hushed whispers. Stand to. Lock and load! The math was simple, and it was brutal. 35 men against what sounded like the vanguard of the entire German army. These are the moments history often forgets, the small hinges upon which great battles turn. We created this channel to find these exact stories to ensure the courage of men like Charles Kelly and his platoon is never lost to time. If you believe their valor deserves a voice, take a moment to subscribe and join our mission to remember them. Then they appear. At first, they are just smudges of white and gray against the snow, apparitions drifting between the thick trunks of the pine trees. German soldiers clad in winter camouflage moving with a confident, deliberate pace. They are not a patrol. They are a column, flowing out of the morning mist like a river of steel and field gray wool. You can see their weapons now. Mauser, 98K rifles, MP-40 submachine guns held at the ready. Behind them, the hulking silhouette of a Panzer IV tank emerges from the fog, its long 75mm cannon pointing forward like an accusing finger. And still more men come, fanning out, their numbers swelling until it is clear this is not a company, but an entire battalion. 500, perhaps 600 enemy soldiers advancing on a front designed to be held by a single, under-strength American platoon. A young private, his eyes wide with disbelief, begins to raise his rifle. Kelly is there in an instant, a firm hand on the soldier's shoulder. "Not yet, son." The lieutenant's voice is a low, steady anchor in the swirling sea of panic. "Not one shot. Let them get closer. Every round has to count." He moves back to his command post, a slightly deeper hole scooped out of the earth, his mind racing. Retreat is not an option. They would be cut down in the open. Surrender is unthinkable. There's only one choice: to stand and fight, to make the enemy pay for every single inch of frozen ground. He knows his men, their training, and the deadly accuracy of their Garand rifles. He knows the strategic placement of their 2 Browning automatic rifles and the single precious M1919 light machine gun that forms the heart of their defense. The German battalion, confident and arrogant, is advancing as if expecting little resistance. They are about to walk into a carefully prepared killing field, orchestrated by a lieutenant who understood that courage, when combined with superior tactics, could become a weapon more powerful than any tank. The command is whispered down the line, "On my signal, on my signal." The German grenadiers are now less than 100 yards away. You can see the eagle and swastika insignia on their helmets, the frost clinging to the wool of their greatcoats, and the arrogant confidence in their stride. They move through the snow-dusted pines as if on a training exercise, their officers gesturing forward, their non-commissioned officers shouting unheard commands. They have no idea they are walking into the jaws of a meticulously crafted trap. The silence in the American line is absolute, a held breath stretching for an eternity. The world narrows to the front sight post of your Garand, centered on the chest of an approaching soldier. The seconds crawl by, each one a lifetime. Lieutenant Kelly raises his hand, holding it steady for 3 long beats, then drops it with a sharp downward slice. It is not a command that is shouted, but a single, sharp crack from Kelly's own rifle that signals the start. Instantly, the frozen forest erupts in a deafening, unified cataclysm of violence. 35 rifles fire as one. The first volley is not a ragged scattering of shots, but a disciplined, concentrated wall of lead. The effect is catastrophic. The lead German platoon simply ceases to exist. Men are thrown backward into the snow, their winter camouflage suddenly stained with crimson. The air is filled with the distinctive ping of 8-round en bloc clips being ejected from M1 rifles, immediately followed by the solid thwack of fresh clips being slammed home. Before the echoes of the first volley have died, a second is on its way. The 2 Browning automatic rifles positioned on the flanks open up with their heavy, thudding reports, their 20-round magazines spitting 30-06 slugs that tear through the trees and the men hiding behind them. From the center of the line, the M1919 machine gun adds its voice to the chorus, a relentless, hammering chatter that scythes through the German ranks, pinning them down, forcing them to dive for the inadequate cover of the forest floor. The initial German confidence shatters into raw, primal panic. Their advance grinds to a halt amid screams of shock and pain. They are trapped in the open, caught in a perfectly triangulated crossfire. This level of battlefield cohesion does not happen by accident. It is forged in brutal training and an unbreakable trust between a commander and his men. We delve into these very details of military history to honor the skill behind the bravery. If you appreciate this deep dive into tactical execution, consider subscribing to our channel and joining our community of history enthusiasts. Lieutenant Kelly is a whirlwind of controlled energy. He moves from position to position, heedless of the sporadic but increasingly intense return fire. "Sergeant, shift the machine gun 10 degrees left. Target that officer trying to rally them," he yells over the din. To a young rifleman, he points, "Private, 200 yards, behind that fallen log. Squeeze the trigger. Do not jerk it." He is the conductor of this deadly orchestra, directing his fire with precision, ensuring no ammunition is wasted. His men respond instantly, their fear channeled into focused aggression. They are no longer just 35 soldiers. They are a single, efficient killing machine, and Charles Kelly is its heart and brain. The Germans, for their part, are soldiers of a veteran army. Their initial shock gives way to a grim professional response. Machine gun teams crawl into position, and the sharp, rapid-fire rip of their MG-42s, Hitler's buzzsaws, begins to answer the American fire. Mortar rounds start to fall, their explosions sending up geysers of black earth and snow among the American foxholes. But the platoon is dug in deep. They have cover. The German battalion is still largely exposed. The hunter has become the hunted. And then, the true giant of the battlefield awakens. The Panzer IV, which had halted in confusion, slowly traverses its turret. The long 75mm cannon swings around, its dark muzzle searching for the source of the American fire. It settles on the muzzle flash of the M1919. There's a deafening, concussive roar that is more felt than heard, a sound that rips through the very air. An orange fireball blossoms from the cannon's mouth, and a high explosive shell screams across the short distance, detonating just in front of the machine gun nest with a ground-shaking blast. The world vanishes in a maelstrom of sound and fury. The high explosive shell's detonation throws dirt, snow, and lethal steel shrapnel in every direction. The M1919 machine gun is violently tossed from its tripod, its barrel bent and twisted into a useless piece of metal. The two-man crew is thrown back into their foxhole, one man screaming, his leg a bloody ruin, the other eerily silent, motionless. The heart of the platoon's defensive fire has been ripped out in a single thunderous blast. For a moment, a stunned silence falls over the American line, broken only by the wounded man's cries and the triumphant chatter of the German MG-42s, which now fire with renewed confidence, their tracers lancing through the smoky air. Lieutenant Kelly feels the concussion wave hit him like a physical blow, but he is already moving before the last clods of frozen earth have returned to the ground. He sees the destroyed machine gun, the casualties, and the looming steel behemoth that caused it all. He knows with cold certainty that if the Panzer IV is allowed to operate freely, it will systematically dismantle his defensive positions one foxhole at a time. His platoon will be annihilated. Panic is a luxury they cannot afford. His voice cuts through the chaos, sharp and clear. "Bazooka team, up! Now! You have the shot!" Two soldiers, Private First Class James Kane and Private Martin Douglas, scramble from their hole. Kane hefts the M1 bazooka, a simple metal tube that seems like a child's toy against the German tank. Douglas follows close behind, clutching two of the 2 36/100th-inch rockets. They are the platoon's only answer to enemy armor. Every man in the platoon instinctively understands what is happening. They increase their rate of fire, pouring a desperate, suppressive volley at the German infantry and the vision slits of the tank, trying to buy their comrades a few precious seconds. These moments, where specialized teams are called upon to perform acts of near-suicidal bravery, are the very essence of battlefield heroism. It is our pledge on this channel to shine a light on these forgotten heroes, the bazooka teams, the medics, the engineers. If you believe their stories must be told, support our work by subscribing. Kane and Douglas low-crawl through the snow to a position behind a thick, ancient pine tree that offers a sliver of cover. The Panzer IV is beginning to advance again, its tracks churning the snow, its coaxial machine gun spitting fire toward the American lines. Kane hoists the bazooka to his shoulder, the cold steel biting into his wool uniform. Douglas, his hands shaking but his movements sure, slides a rocket into the rear of the tube and connects the wires. He slaps Kane firmly on the helmet. "Loaded!" he shouts over the gunfire. Kane squints through the simple iron sights. The tank fills his entire field of view, a monstrous, seemingly invincible entity of Krupp steel. He knows he has to hit the treads, or perhaps the weaker side armor if it turns. The frontal glacis plate would likely just deflect the rocket's shaped charge. He waits, his breathing ragged, his heart hammering against his ribs. The tank continues its slow, inexorable advance. "Steady, Jimmy. Steady," he mutters to himself. The Panzer's turret begins to traverse toward them. It knows where they are. They have seconds at most. He leads the target slightly, takes a final, shuddering breath, and squeezes the trigger. There is no bang, only a loud whoosh and a brilliant flash of backblast that kicks up a cloud of snow behind them. The rocket streaks across the 75 yards of no man's land, a thin trail of smoke marking its path. Time seems to stretch and distort. The entire platoon watches, their rifles momentarily silent. The rocket flies true. It strikes the tank not on its thick frontal plate, but on the left side, right at the complex junction where the drive sprocket meets the track. The resulting explosion is not large, but it is focused and violent. A bright orange-white flash is followed by a shower of sparks and a harsh metallic shriek of tortured steel. The Panzer lurches to a halt, its left track broken and spilling onto the snow like a shattered iron chain. The behemoth is crippled, immobilized, a sitting duck. The crippled Panzer IV is a victory, but a fleeting one. Though immobilized, it is far from dead. The turret swings with a renewed, vengeful purpose, and the 75mm main gun roars again, sending another high-explosive shell crashing into the American line. This time it detonates against a thick pine tree, showering the nearby foxholes with deadly wooden splinters and shrapnel. The tank's coaxial and bow machine guns continue to hose down the platoon's position, their relentless fire forcing the GIs to keep their heads down. The German infantry, seeing their armored support still in the fight, begins to regroup. An officer's whistle cuts through the din, and a fresh assault wave rises from the snow, firing from the hip as they advance. Lieutenant Kelly sees the tactical reality in an instant. His platoon is pinned. Their central machine gun is gone, and the enemy is regaining the initiative. Static defense is now a death sentence. He has to get his men moving to re-establish fire superiority from a new angle. He yells to Sergeant Miller, his platoon sergeant, "Miller! Get the first squad moving! Leapfrog back to that small ridge! Cover them, second squad!" The order is a calculated risk. To move under this volume of fire is to invite casualties, but to stay is to guarantee annihilation. This is the art of command under fire, making impossible choices in the crucible of combat. It is this level of tactical decision-making so often overlooked in grand histories that we strive to illuminate. The stories of leaders like Lieutenant Kelly, who outthought their opponents, are the bedrock of military legend. If you are fascinated by the strategy and tactics behind these heroic stands, please subscribe to our channel to see more in-depth analyses. Sergeant Miller, a grizzled veteran of the Normandy campaign, needs no further instruction. He signals to the first squad. One by one, in pairs, the men burst from their foxholes. They run in a low crouch for 10, maybe 15 yards, then dive back into the snow, firing a few rounds at the advancing Germans before getting up to run again. It is a textbook fire and maneuver drill, executed not on a pristine training range, but in the heart of a frozen, lethal hell. The second squad provides the covering fire, their garrons and bars roaring, concentrating their shots on the German machine gun positions and any grenadier who makes himself a target. The air becomes a thick, lethal web of crisscrossing bullets. Kelly, meanwhile, is not content to simply direct the withdrawal. He sees a new opportunity. The German battalion commander, believing the American platoon is in full retreat, is becoming careless. He and his command group have moved forward, setting up behind a small snow-covered mound to better direct the assault. They are partially exposed. Kelly crawls over to the platoon's best marksman, a quiet corporal from Pennsylvania named Abe Goldstein. "Goldstein," Kelly says, his voice urgent, pointing a gloved finger. 250 yards. See that group of officers? Target the one with the map case. Take your time. Make it count. Corporal Goldstein nods, his face a mask of concentration. He carefully props his garand on the lip of his foxhole, using his pack as a stable rest. He ignores the chaos of the battle, letting the world fade away until all that exists is the front sight blade, the rear aperture, and the distant figure of the German officer. He controls his breathing, letting half of it out, and gently, smoothly, squeezes the trigger. The M1 bucks against his shoulder. 250 yards away, the German officer stiffens, his map case flying from his hand, and collapses into the snow. A moment of confusion ripples through the German command element. Goldstein works the action of his rifle, settles his sights on another figure, a radio operator, and fires again. The second German falls. The heart of the enemy attack has been surgically and brutally decapitated. The targeted assassination of the German command element creates a momentary beautiful paralysis in the enemy's assault. The grenadiers, suddenly leaderless, hesitate. Their advance loses its momentum, sputtering to a halt as men dive for cover or look around for orders that will not come. It is the priceless seconds-long window of opportunity that Lieutenant Kelly needed. The first squad, having clawed its way to the relative safety of the low ridge behind them, immediately turns and opens fire. Their rifles add to the din, taking over the role of the covering element with practiced efficiency. "Second squad, go!" Sergeant Miller bellows, his voice raw. "Move, goddammit, move!" Men who had been providing covering fire now scramble to their feet, their turn to run the deadly gauntlet. They sprint in staggered bounds, the snow sucking at their boots, their lungs burning from the cold and the exertion. The air around them is a hornet's nest of crisscrossing fire. The immobilized Panzer's bow machine gun traverses, spitting a stream of 7.92 millimeter rounds that tear up the snow at their heels. A young private, a kid from rural Ohio named Peterson, cries out, a sharp, piercing sound, and pitches forward, his leg twisting unnaturally beneath him. Without hesitation, the man running beside him, Corporal Sanchez, grabs the wounded private by the straps of his field pack and begins dragging him backward, yard by agonizing yard, toward the new defensive line. The squad's bar gunner, seeing his comrades in peril, plants his feet, leans into his weapon, and empties the last 10 rounds of his magazine in a single, defiant roar, hammering the vision slits of the Panzer IV. It is a gesture of pure, selfless fury, designed to buy Sanchez and Peterson a few more precious seconds of life before he too turns and bounds for cover. This is small unit leadership at its finest, a testament to the training and trust that allows a platoon to function as a single organism even in the face of annihilation. We focus on these incredible displays of battlefield cohesion because they reveal the true character of the American soldier. To ensure these stories of tactical brilliance are preserved, take a moment to subscribe and support our work. Lieutenant Kelly is the last man to leave the original line. He stays in his foxhole, firing his Garand in a steady, aimed rhythm, one shot, one German target, providing his own covering fire until the last of his men have reached the ridge. Only when his rifle is empty and the clip ejects with a sharp ping does he finally move, sprinting low and fast, zigzagging across the torn-up snow. A burst of machine gun fire rips the space where he was just a moment before. He dives headfirst into a shallow depression beside Sergeant Miller, the breath exploding from his lungs in a white cloud. The platoon is battered, breathing heavily, but it is consolidated on the new position. The ridge, though not high, offers a distinct advantage. It provides better cover and gives them a clear, downward-sloping field of fire for nearly 200 yards. The Germans will now have to advance uphill across open ground to get to them. A medic is already working on Peterson's leg, applying a tourniquet and injecting morphine. The men are frantically redistributing ammunition, their faces streaked with grime and sweat, their eyes wide but steady. They have paid for this ground with blood, but it has bought them a fighting chance. The respite, however, is terrifyingly brief. Below them, the German NCOs, professional and ruthless, are already restoring order. They are shouting, gesturing, pushing their men into a new, broader assault formation. The next wave is coming, and it will be a tsunami of field gray aimed at their tiny island of resistance. The German non-commissioned officers are ruthless in their efficiency. Their shrill whistles cut through the lingering echoes of battle, and their guttural shouts drive the grenadiers back into formation. There is no finesse this time, only brutal, overwhelming force. The German line reforms, wider and deeper than before, a solid mass of field gray and white camouflage that seems to stretch from one end of the clearing to the other. The assault comes not as a single wave, but as a relentless tide. The surviving MG-42 team set up a base of fire, their weapons unleashing a horrifying torrent of lead that shrieks and cracks just inches over the heads of the men huddled on the ridge. The air itself seems to tear apart. Under the cover of this murderous barrage, the German riflemen advance, not in a steady, inexorable walk, but in a determined trot, firing their Mausers from the hip. Mortar rounds begin to fall again, bracketing the American position, their crumping explosions churning the frozen ground and sending showers of dirt and shrapnel into the shallow foxholes. The crippled Panzer, a wounded but still lethal beast, joins the chorus, its main gun firing methodically, blasting away chunks of the ridge and turning sheltering trees into jagged, splintered stumps. The sheer volume of fire is terrifying, designed to break the will of any defender. Lieutenant Kelly crawls along his line, his face grim. "Hold your fire!" he shouts, his voice nearly drowned out by the maelstrom. "Hold it! Let them get closer! Make every round a eulogy!" His men obey, pressing themselves as deep as they can into the frozen earth, the world a blur of noise and concussive force. They are being tested beyond the limits of human endurance. This is the very definition of holding the line, a story of human fortitude that fuels our mission on this channel. If you believe this spirit of defiance deserves to be remembered, please take a moment to subscribe and ensure these legacies are never forgotten. The German line reaches the 100-yard mark, then 75. You can see the determined, grim-set faces of the enemy soldiers. Kelly raises his rifle. "Now!" he screams. "Fire!" Once again, the ridge explodes with disciplined, rapid fire. The Garands crack, the bars roar, and the lead elements of the German assault falter and go down. But for every man that falls, 2 more seem to take his place. The tide of field gray does not stop. It just keeps coming. Sergeant Miller crawls over to Kelly, his face a mask of desperation. "Lieutenant!" he yells over the gunfire. "Ammo! We are down to 2 clips a man. The bars have maybe a magazine each." The words hang in the air, a death sentence. 30-odd American riflemen with only a few hundred rounds left between them against an entire German battalion that is now closing to within 50 yards. The American fire, which had been a steady, disciplined roar, begins to sputter into individual sporadic shots as men try to conserve their last precious rounds. The Germans sense the weakening resistance. They give a guttural cheer and break into a charge, their bayonets fixed and glinting in the bleak winter light. They are coming to finish the job with cold steel. Kelly's mind works with the preternatural calm of a man who has accepted his fate but refuses to yield. He sees the few remaining wooden crates of MiG-2 fragmentation grenades tucked into a depression behind the line. A desperate, almost insane idea forms. He scrambles over to the crates, prying one open with the tip of his bayonet. He turns back to his men, his voice carrying with an authority that cuts through their fear. "Fix bayonets," he commands. The order sends a cold shock through the line, but the men obey. The metallic scrape of steel on steel, a grim sound in the cacophony. "Everyone!" Kelly roars. "Grab grenades! Use them on my command!" The first wave of charging German grenadiers is now just 30 yards away. You can see the hate in their eyes, hear the ragged gasps of their breath. Their bayonets are a forest of gleaming steel points, promising a swift and brutal end. The few remaining American rifles fire their last rounds. The distinctive ping of empty Garand clips echoes all along the line. This is it. The final moment. Lieutenant Kelly rises to one knee, a fragmentation grenade in his hand, the pin already pulled. He holds his arm back, waiting for the perfect, terrible instant. "Wait for it," he commands, his voice a low growl of pure defiance. The Germans are at 20 yards, a human tsunami about to crash over them. "No!" Kelly roars. In a single, coordinated motion, 24 American arms swing forward. 24 MiG-2 grenades arc through the air, their pineapple-shaped bodies tumbling end over end, and fall directly into the path of the charging enemy. For a heartbeat, there is only the sound of pounding boots. Then, the world disintegrates. The grenades detonate in a rolling, deafening chain reaction of fire, steel, and concussive force. The front ranks of the German charge are shredded, vaporized, men are lifted from their feet and torn apart by white-hot shrapnel. The momentum of the assault is shattered in a single, cataclysmic instant of violence. But it is not enough. The Germans behind the initial wave, though stunned and bloodied, press on, stumbling over the bodies of their comrades. They surge over the lip of the ridge. The battle dissolves into a primitive medieval brawl. It is the chaos of bayonet against rifle butt, of entrenching tools swung like axes, of fists and knives and desperate, animalistic rage. Corporal Goldstein, his rifle empty, smashes the stock into the face of a German soldier, then drives his bayonet home. Sergeant Miller, a giant of a man, wrestles a Mauser from an enemy's hands and uses it as a club. Lieutenant Kelly, his own pistol empty, fights with a captured bayonet, parrying and thrusting in the swirling, grunting mass of bodies. They are overwhelmed. For every German they cut down, 3 more seem to appear. The line is no longer a line, but a series of desperate, isolated struggles for survival. And then, through the din of combat, comes a new sound. It is not the sharp crack of a Mauser or the steady report of a Garand. It is the deep, hammering, rhythmic roar of Browning M2 .50 caliber heavy machine guns. It is a sound of salvation. Over the crest of the hill behind them, 2 American M3 half-tracks crest the ridge, their mounted machine guns already blazing, spitting thick, heavy tracers that rip through the German rear echelons. The arrival of a relief force at the moment of certain death is the stuff of legend, a testament to the fact that no soldier truly fights alone. Just as these reinforcements bolstered Kelly's line, you can reinforce our mission to tell these incredible stories. Subscribing to this channel is your way of ensuring that the valor shown here today reaches a new generation. Behind the half-tracks, the boxy silhouettes of M4 Sherman tanks appear, their engines roaring, their coaxial machine guns adding to the crescendo. A company of American infantry dismounts, spreading out and immediately laying down a withering base of fire. The German battalion, which had been seconds from victory, suddenly finds itself caught between the stubborn remnants of Kelly's platoon and a fresh, heavily armed American relief force. The shock is total. Their attack, which had been fueled by grim determination, collapses into chaos and panic. The grenadiers, who had fought so hard to take the ridge, now throw down their weapons and flee, or are cut down by the relentless fire of the Shermans and half-tracks. Within minutes, the fight is over. The survivors of the German battalion melt back into the silent, snow-covered forest from which they came. A profound, ringing silence descends on the ridge, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the idling of American engines. Lieutenant Kelly slowly gets to his feet, leaning on a discarded rifle for support. He is covered in dirt and blood, his own and others. He looks around at the scene of carnage. The snow is black and red, and he looks at his men. Of the 35 who had faced the dawn, fewer than 15 are left standing. They are exhausted, wounded, and emotionally shattered, but they are alive. They held. Against an entire battalion, against a tank, against impossible odds, this single heroic platoon had held the line. The captain commanding the relief company approaches Lieutenant Kelly, his eyes wide as he takes in the scene. He looks at the handful of exhausted, blood-spattered survivors, then at the scores of German dead littering the snow-covered slope, and finally, at the smoking, crippled Panzer IV. He shakes his head in disbelief. "Lieutenant," the captain says, his voice filled with awe, "we were told a platoon was being overrun. We were not told they were holding off a goddamn Panzer Grenadier battalion by themselves." He looks at Kelly, then at the exhausted faces of his men. How did you do it?" Kelly does not have an answer. He is too tired to form the words. He simply gestures with a weary hand toward his men. Toward Corporal Goldstein, who is cleaning his rifle with shaking hands. Toward Corporal Sanchez, who is helping the medic tend to the wounded. Toward Sergeant Miller, who is already conducting a head count, his face a stone mask of grief for the fallen. The answer was in them. It was in their training, their discipline, and the unbreakable bond that had been forged in the crucible of this frozen forest. For 6 hours, they had refused to break. They had delayed a force more than 15 times their size, buying incalculable, precious time for the main American defensive lines around the crucial crossroads of Bastogne to be solidified. Their stand was not an isolated act of bravery. It was a critical piece in a much larger puzzle. The German offensive, the Ardennes counteroffensive, known to the Americans as the Battle of the Bulge, relied on speed and surprise. Every hour of delay, every roadblock, threw their ambitious timetable into chaos. The stand made by Lieutenant Charles Kelly and his men on this forgotten ridge was one of the 1,000 cuts that would ultimately bleed the German war machine to a halt before it could reach its objectives. Their actions echoed far beyond this small patch of blood-soaked ground.